writing was invented to keep track of debts. It's
That's a
invented
crazy
by
theory.
accountants.
Yeah. Wait, we have to pause to take that in. So the argument is that written language followed from debts. So this is probably by itself a really good reason to understand the origin of money because it's so primary that it supersedes even our need to communicate stories through written language.
Yeah, they were
Let's
like,
say,
everybody can
though,
remember the story, but the exact and precise number of things that you owe me in order for me to be able to survive into next season by having enough seed or ale or whatever else, like that somehow seems to be of primary importance. They're like, anybody can remember a story. It's probably not life or death, but this actually might be life or death.
we can get into where this probably came from. But what I wanted to emphasize is that these original debts are not in money form. They're debts. And the our argument is that money developed out of the debts.
Well, they're like, they're stuff, debts of stuff. It's like
Yes, they
sheaves
are
of
stuff.
Because they're
wheat.
not tokenized, is that why they're not considered money?
There is no what we call unit of account to measure the size of the debts.
Hmm.
You owe me 3 pigs, or you owe me 3 bushels of wheat. That's what you have to deliver back to me. Okay? But somewhere in the distant past, they came up with a unit of measurement that I could apply to both pigs and wheat and say, oh, that is 5 devans, or that one is 3 shekels. Um, all the early measuring units were based on grain, which gives us some kind of a hint that they started making grain equivalents for every possible thing that you might owe. And that becomes a money of account.
So it's really interesting that you say that grain is the center because I imagine that in those days, grain is and this is going to sound crazy, but grain is the equivalent of petroleum. It's the thing that makes everything go. You have to feed your pigs grain. You have to feed your people grain. You have to put grain into the beer. You have to put grain into the field. Literally, the foundation of the society is grain. Like, how much grain do you need to feed a pig to get it to market? How much grain do you need to feed your soldier to get him to war? Is kind of the same question of like, how much energy do you need? And so it seems like at the very root of economics is this relationship between
Power supply,
yeah, like motive,
fuel,
fuel,
fuel.
accounting, and debt.
I don't think it's too controversial that civilization comes out of agriculture and grain. So the first civilizations were based on grain. You needed grain to feed thousands of people, and and you had to be productive enough to have elites who did not have to work to support themselves.
Mm.
And that's when you start developing civilization. You can have people who can focus on science, technology, the arts, religion, and so on, because you're so productive that you can support a population that basically doesn't do anything to uh, survive.
Well, they're
Oh,
managerial to some extent, right? Yeah, I think I was just saying that you have the ability to have this managerial class, right? Some sort of hierarchy set up where people, their whole job is just to organize society to some extent.
And enrich themselves.
That's you.
You get the rise of an upper class with the development of these grain societies. When we were talking about debts, these predate civilization. Tribal society had debts. The debts were uh, a system in the German tribes is called Wehrgeld. And we know a lot about it because the Romans were civilized and the Germans were still tribal society, and they studied them to see how they operated and wrote it down. We know tribal society has a system of debt, and it's mostly If I injure someone in your family, then my family owes your family. And they had a system of fines that you would have to pay. But they had fines for everything. Any possible injury you might cause would have a particular fine you had to pay. So debts are as old as humans, as far as we know. And we know that chimpanzees have systems of debts too. A chimp will remember whether I helped fight off another chimp or not. If I helped fight off one, then I have a credit. And the chimp I help has a debt.